An old pickup sat hidden beneath years of dust, its paint dull and peeling, a forgotten relic of someone's past. When 3 adopted children pooled their savings to surprise their hard-working dad, they thought they were simply buying him a fixer-upper, a symbol of gratitude. But the moment he opened the creaking door, something unexpected shifted the air, an object wedged beneath the seat, heavy with history and pain. It wasn't just a car anymore, it was a key to a secret marked by prejudice and long-buried injustice. What truth waited inside that rusted frame, and why had it been hidden for so long? James Walker had built his life on quiet resilience. A single father in a small Midwestern town, he spent long days repairing engines at the local garage and long nights making sure his 3 adopted children felt safe and loved. To neighbors, he was the man who never missed a school recital or Sunday dinner, a steady presence in a world that often overlooked families like his, black, blended, and fiercely proud. Money was always tight, but James never complained. His joy came from watching his kids grow, their laughter filling the modest house, like music. Still, the past lingered like a shadow. He rarely spoke of it, and when he did, it was in careful fragments, a vague reference to hard times and old wounds he'd rather leave behind. One crisp autumn afternoon, the children arrived home beaming, a secret barely contained. They had pooled savings from weekend jobs and surprise gifts to buy him something they knew he'd cherish, a beat-up old pickup they'd found at a country auction. To them it was more than a vehicle, it was a thank you, a chance for their dad to rebuild something just for himself. What they didn't know, and what James would soon discover, was that the truck carried a story far older and darker than its rusted panels suggested. Somewhere within its dented frame waited a reminder that the world had not forgotten the prejudices he'd worked so hard to shield them from. The truck looked like any other relic of long drives and hard labor, but the moment James slid behind the wheel, unease crept in. A faint metallic rattle came from beneath the driver's seat, sharp and deliberate, like something hidden and waiting. He reached down, fingers brushing a cold, narrow box wedged into the frame. Dust choked the air as he pulled it free, a weathered metal container sealed tight with a rusty latch. Inside lay an envelope yellowed by decades, its edges frayed as if handled by trembling hands. Across the front, a name was scrawled in fading ink, Thomas Walker, his father's name. James felt the room tilt. His father had died before he was born, a subject his own mother had avoided with careful silence. The children crowded closer, but James's heartbeat thundered too loudly for him to speak. He unfolded the brittle paper and began to read. The words hit like blows, a letter written by his grandfather, recounting nights of terror in the 1960s when a black family dared to buy land in a white neighborhood. There were details of cross burnings, threats scratched into doors, and a final warning from local authorities who refused to protect them. "Leave, or you'll never see your boy grow up," the letter ended. James's chest tightened. His grandfather had hidden this letter, perhaps inside this very truck, after fleeing the town where the Walker name was spat like a curse. And now, decades later, that same small town was James's home. At first, he told himself those days were gone, that his children would never face such hate. But when he tried to trace the truck's history at the county records office the next morning, the clerk's smile thinned the moment she read his name. "No record of that vehicle," she said curtly, though he saw the file on her desk. The next signs came quickly. A fresh scratch carved into his garage door, a single word, "Leave." A neighbor who had once waved every evening now turned his back. The kids began noticing a dark sedan idling across the street after sunset. Each incident felt small enough to dismiss, but together they built a wall of dread. James reported the harassment, but the local police chief, whose badge gleamed like an unspoken threat, offered nothing but a tight grin. "Probably kids messing around," he said, his eyes flat. The same indifference his grandfather had faced, echoing across decades. The children tried to be brave, but their whispers at night betrayed the fear. James felt history pressing in, as if the truck had not only delivered a message, but awakened something malicious that had waited for its chance. Late one night, a thud against the house snapped him awake. He rushed outside to find the pickup's hood open, its engine drenched in gasoline, the smell sharp and dangerous. A single match on the ground glowed faintly in the moonlight before the breeze snuffed it out. Someone wanted the past buried. Someone wanted them gone. And James knew the next move would not be a warning. The night of the town's harvest festival should have been alive with music and lantern light, but James couldn't shake the heaviness in his chest. His children had begged him to go, to feel normal again, they said. So he forced a smile and walked the crowded square, every sense sharpened by weeks of unease. Halfway through the evening, a sudden hush rippled through the crowd. James turned and froze. The old pickup, the gift meant to honor his years of sacrifice, now stood in the center of Main Street, its headlights glaring like accusing eyes. Someone had pushed it there. Spray painted across the driver's side, letters dripped in bright, wet red. Not welcome. The children gasped. A ring of spectators formed, some shocked, some whispering, a few with thin, satisfied smirks. The police chief arrived last, strolling as if to a casual errand. He met James's gaze with a faint shrug, then looked away. Anger and fear tangled in James's chest. This was no secret threat now, it was a public declaration. The same message that had driven his grandfather into the night decades ago was being shouted across time, daring him to run. But instead of backing away, James stepped forward. He climbed onto the truck's bumper, his boots slick with fresh paint, and faced the crowd. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear his own voice as he spoke, not in a shout, but with steady, unshaken clarity about the family that had survived these streets before, about the letter that told of hate and silence, and about the children who deserved more than another generation of fear. For a heartbeat, the square was silent. The chief's smirk faltered. A single neighbor lowered his eyes. Then, from the edge of the crowd, someone threw a bottle. It shattered against the truck's side with a violent crack, spraying shards across James's feet. The moment balanced on a knife's edge, between the hate of the past and the fragile possibility of change, when a voice finally broke the silence. The bottle's crash seemed to echo for miles, but James didn't flinch. His children rushed to his side, their small hands gripping his jacket, as if to anchor him. From the crowd, a few voices, quiet at first, then steadier, rose in his defense. Neighbors he barely knew stepped forward, forming a loose circle around the truck. Someone called out the police chief by name, demanding action. The smirks faded. The tension broke, not with a roar, but with a collective refusal to look away. By the time dawn touched the rooftops, the hateful paint was gone. Volunteers had scrubbed it clean, their brushes moving in silent solidarity. The truck still bore faint scars, but it stood upright, a witness to both cruelty and courage. James understood that the letter his grandfather left was more than a warning, it was a challenge. The same forces that had tried to drive one generation from their home had resurfaced, testing whether silence would win again. But his children had seen something else that night. That hate could be met, not just with fear, but with presence, with voices that refused to be quiet. He decided to preserve the letter, not as a relic of pain, but as proof of endurance. He spoke at town meetings, shared his family's story in schools, and watched as conversations about hidden prejudice began to surface. Change came slowly, unevenly, but it had begun. This wasn't just a fight for his family. It was a reminder of a larger truth. Racism rarely dies on its own. It survives in shadows until someone brings it into the light. So when you see injustice, on your street, in your school, at your job, will you stay silent, or will you stand where it's hardest and make your presence impossible to ignore?